all I can remember was the feeling that these songs are important to be shared, but I didn't even know what that meant. It wasn't, there was no obvious path like, oh, now it's a lot more obvious. Oh, anyone could make things and like share it on the internet and post on YouTube. But in 2007, we had iTunes was maybe a year old. YouTube wasn't really even at all mainstream. So there, it was more of an existential, like we need to share these songs, and we have no idea how to do that or what that means, but we're just
Mm.
going to sort of probe in the dark and take steps forward. So I think by 2008, we went, oh, there's this thing called MySpace. You can take these songs that we're recording in our home, we can export it as an MP3 and upload it. Like, okay, how does that work? Okay, cool. Now it's up. Now what do we call this? Well, you need a page. Well, we need a name. So we brainstormed a name, and United Pursuit was the name. So we stuck the name on, uploaded on MySpace and started sharing it with people. So I think, when I look back, I see the path, but when I remember what it felt like to be 20 years old there was no like steps to take other than just like, what do we do next? What happens? But
Mm.
there was a through line that these songs feel important to share.
Welcome to another episode of Goodmakers podcast. My name is Paul Anleitner. I'm your host, and today I'm joined by a couple of very dear friends, Brock, Human, and Nathan Fray. Brock and Nathan were co-founders of a very influential music collective and worship movement that really did transform church music in the mid-2000s into the 2010s, and I am really, really excited to have them share with you about their story. How did United Pursuit come to be? What did they learn from those experiences? When was it time to start a new chapter in life? And then how do you rebuild after already building something so meaningful and so important to so many? I think you're going to get so much out of today's conversation. You can find out more about the Goodmakers mission at goodmakers.co and get connected with me and a number of other people in our leadership network, people like Brock and Nathan, who are in our leadership advisory team, and many others all over this good old USA. I don't know if you guys have ever done this before, really, but kind of telling the story of United Pursuit. Brock, Nathan, lots of people might recognize your faces from music videos on YouTube and Red Rocks concerts and living room experiences. How did all of that begin? Nathan, maybe I'll start with your side of the story, and because you and I go back, we knew each other from the beginning of those kind of early
Yeah.
days. So tell us a little bit about how United Pursuit began, and Brock, feel free to chime in and correct Nathan anytime he gets something wrong, right?
Oh, no. Yes. Yeah. Please fact check me as I get older. The memories get a little fuzzier sometimes. I think growing up in East Tennessee, grew up in Knoxville. Now I see that it was a really special conditions that created the kind of origin story of United Pursuit, but it had a lot to do with all my friends were musicians, and that was what was normal. That's all I knew. And now I've gotten older, I realized that's actually not normal at all. And a lot of people don't know how to play any instrument, but for me, I was surrounded by musicians. I grew up playing the drums, and my brother played piano. My parents were musical. So it was really natural. Going to church was, I saw a path to contribute and play. So started playing drums as a kid. I think pretty much early high school, and then got involved playing music at a small house church. For was just it was great. It was like I learned how to play in more of like an evangelical, not a mega church, but you know, nice carpet, nice sound system, and then that was very structured 30-minute sessions or worship services, and then in the house church it was 2-hour plus type of experiences. So that was, my beginning to really explore, bringing craft, musicality, and then exploration and improv with friends, which is very much what United Pursuit became. But that was the beginning. And one of the guys in that house church was a guy named Will Reagan, who you probably know his name. If you know United Pursuit's music, he was 2 years younger than me. So I think he was a freshman and I was a junior in high school. So that was, the beginning of watching him um, learn to become a worship leader. And then at some point, I started noticing he was writing his own music, and that was new. It was like, Hey, what is this? You have your own songs. You're kind of going off script. You're not just playing Chris Tomlin or Hillsong or whatever." And that was about the time we intersected with Brock. I'll let Brock. You can kind of share from your side what it was like to meet young 18-year-old Will and 20-year-old Nathan.
Yeah, so
2006. Yeah, 2006.
yeah, so the context is Will and Nathan and I all grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, in the same town, but we didn't know each other. I mean, these guys met earlier, but I didn't know them at all. But at this point, I had moved to California. I had fallen in love with a girl, and she was 19, I was 18, and her parents were missionaries, and they were running a school in Africa, Southeast Africa, Mozambique. And so I'm going to chase a girl. I'm like, it's time to meet the parents. I've been dating for, 6, 7 months. And I'm like, your parents live in Africa? Cool. Let's go to Africa this summer. Um, and gosh, it was a crazy trip. It's like you fly to Johannesburg and then you fly to Maputo, then you fly to Pemba, and you just end in the middle of nowhere in a tiny town. And there's a missionary school. And there's a big tent and dirt floor, and a bunch of people gathered from all over the world, that had found their way to this tiny town to be a part of this school. And then I just hear there's two guys from Knoxville, Tennessee there. They're like, "Oh, you're from Knoxville. There's two other kids from Knoxville." It's like that's literally impossible. Like no one
No way.
no one
No
ever
way.
leaves Knoxville, much less to come this far. But then I was like, "Oh, yeah." So I went over and met them, and I had met Nathan once when we were, I think, 16. So I recognized him, and then Will I'd never met. And yeah, we were the Knoxville boys in Africa. And we were, because, as it happens in these sort of, school environments, whoever can play guitar and has the capacity to lead worship, ends up in that position sort of full time. So that's what we did. We were on the little makeshift, wooden plywood stage that's about 12 inches tall. And Nathan had some abomination of a drum kit that they
Yeah.
that they found. Uh, and yeah, Will and we played music every single day, under that tent for a mission school for, what was it, 2.5 months or something that we were
Yeah.
overseas. And that's kind of when we bonded and first got the courage to show each other song ideas, and spent hours and hours on the little porches there, that they had built for the school. And yeah, we just bonded over that summer. And actually, I think at this point we hadn't even written like worship songs.
Mhm.
So it was, Will was like opening the Bible and just like singing straight scripture.
Hmm.
And we were just, yeah. And there was a
What year
lot of
was
like
this?
play with the room.
What year would this have
Uh,
been, guys?
Summer
2000.
2006.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, summer 2006. Yeah,
Mhm.
Brock, you reminded me. I have a clear memory of playing that drum kit that you were describing. Just, I don't know, barely. It didn't even have stands that worked anymore. So what would happen is the young kids from the village were holding the drums up, but they were tiny. They're like 5-year-olds, so they were on the ground and they were looking up at me, holding
No
the
way.
drums so I could play.
No
I
way.
wish I
That
had
is
a photo
amazing.
so bad of that, but I just look at, I can picture their little eyes looking up at me. I'm like playing. I'm like, are they going to get hearing damage? But they just were like, keep going. Uh, the great memory. But yeah,
It was so much fun.
that summer, Will brought a little like tape recorder or some sort of recording device. And so what Brock was saying is we would kind of gather around later at night, and Will would open up the Bible and we would sing through scripture, but he had his little recorder there going. So we started getting in that process of recording little ideas that summer.
Hmm.
I guess I'll kind of fast forward a bit. So Will and I went back home, right back to, back to our life. And we both had odd jobs. I don't even, don't even remember what we were doing. But there was such a lack, such a, a gulf between the experience we had and back home. Like, how do we need to live? We want to keep this experience going, surrounded by, our friends who have shared vision for life and passion for God and for music. And so that kind of began the like, well, how do we do this? And we talked to Will and I talked both to our parents and said, hey, we have this idea. What if we could have a community kind of house? Um, would how is that possible? Could you guys help us get a down payment? Now, houses back in 2006 in our part of town were under $100,000, and so we cobbled together, I think, a $10,000 down payment and bought a old rundown craftsman house from 1890, really really old. And so within, I think, 6 months of coming back from Africa, Will and I moved into this old house. It was on Banks Avenue. You might know that might sound familiar for an album that we recorded there a couple years later. But we moved onto that house, and I didn't know anything about construction. Will did, so Will started just knocking down walls, and I was helping the best I could, and we built a home recording studio in that house within that first year. And the whole goal the whole time was, hey, we need to get Brock in here. That was our first. We knew, we're like, if we can get the studio, we're going to be able to tell Brock about this, and maybe he'll come and spend some time with us. So we worked super hard and caught Brock back in town. I think you're probably visiting your family, and
Hmm.
Brock came in, and we just, I kind of spilled the beans and just told him, hey, what if we did this? What if we made music? Hey, all those recordings we have for Mozambique, we've been sharing them around to our friends. I think there's something here, like that song you wrote, "Come Away." We should record that.
Right.
And so I think, Brock, if my memory's right, we kind of caught you leaving town, but you decided to come back. So you came back
Hmm.
that next summer for
Yeah.
2007. Yep. What do you
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
about that time?
I think you're right. Yeah. I was visiting family. You were like, come over. I came over and caught you guys in the middle of, probably building a sound panel or something. And Will had a Cubase running on a on a computer. Yeah, just hearing the first thing that you guys were tinkering with, reminiscing about the summer, seeing this sort of like fork that you'd taken in the road, the choice that you'd made to do a community house after that summer in Mozambique, I was pretty like, okay, yeah, I have to come back and just live here for a bit. So I can't remember what the timeline was, but I came back and stayed with you guys for about a month, and we got started. We
Yeah.
started recording music.
I remember Nathan. I mean, I asked about what year you guys were in Mozambique because I'm trying to piece my own timeline together
Mhm.
here. But I have what would have probably been not long after that summer. Maybe it was in 2007. I can't recall. I remember being in the back seat of a car with you. Can't remember who was driving. We're going from one church to the next. For those that are didn't know this or don't know this, I used to be a musician as well, not on the level of these guys in any way, shape, or form. But Nathan and I were traveling around the country with some other friends at the time, and I remember you going, "I want to show you guys something," and it was a recording from Mozambique of "Come Away," and
Mhm.
I have
Um,
that experience like ingrained into my consciousness still because
Mhm.
I mean, we
mm,
we were all completely submerged in all sorts of different kinds of music, both in the church, outside of the church. It was, I think, when you grow up in kind of the charismatic and Pentecostal world, I think one of the things I've learned, kind of looking back, is songs for me at least, and this is what I felt when I heard that song around probably what was a bonfire or something in Mozambique. I heard the thing that marked me when I was like a freshman in high school. You know, the experience of actually being like, when you say come away with me, like being taken someplace. I don't know how else to
Mhm,
describe it. I do know I have some other language now. You know, I've tried to
mhm,
kind of work through both the theology and the
mhm,
psychology of it to bring an integrated approach. I know I'm experiencing something that, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi called the flow state. And I
mhm,
felt like so much of what we were hunting for together was
mhm,
how to get in that place. And when
mhm,
I heard that song, I was like, I'm there. Somehow
mhm,
you had,
mhm.
even just in what was a really, I don't know, maybe it was just even a tape recorder. I don't know how you guys even originally
Yeah,
recorded that out in Mozambique. I was there with you guys. You somehow transported me. It captured something of that shared experience. And so, how
mhm,
much of what you guys were trying to do and building a studio in the Banks house, you guys were very early on in the kind of, we're going to capture a live music worship experience in a circle and put it on YouTube, and probably even before YouTube, share video of that.
yeah.
What were you guys trying to do in capturing those experiences? Looking back, like, what was your motivation? Why did you? Because I know there's a lot of people that just go, "Hey, we're in a living room, we're in a house church. We got some guitars. We play, we sing." But what was driving you guys to do some sort of capturing of that experience?
Mhm. That's a great question. It all I can remember was the feeling that these songs are important to be shared, but I didn't even know what that meant. It wasn't, there was no obvious path like, oh, now it's a lot more obvious. Oh, anyone could make things and like share it on the internet and post on YouTube. But in 2007, we had iTunes was maybe a year old. YouTube wasn't really even at all mainstream. So there, it was a more of an existential, like, we need to share these songs, and we have no idea how to do that or what that means, but we're just
Mm.
going to sort of probe in the dark and take steps forward. So I think by 2008, we went, oh, there's this thing called MySpace. You could take these songs that we're recording in our home, we can export it as an MP3 and upload it. Like, okay, how does that work? Okay, cool. Now it's up. Now what do we call this? Well, you need a page. Well, we need a name. So then we brainstormed a name, and United Pursuit was the name. So we stuck the name on, uploaded on MySpace and started sharing it with people. So I think, when I look back, I see the path, but when I remember what it felt like to be 20 years old, there was no like steps to take other than just like, what do we do next? What happens? But
Hmm.
there was a through line that these songs feel important to share, and I don't even know why. Um, but they're tools. They were there for more than just the moment it happened. Like, music happens in this, like, if ephemeral moment, but then sometimes what's in that, it also lives on, and there's a bit of a magic to it. I don't know when songs are supposed to move beyond the live experience. But yeah, I
Hmm.
don't know if you can
Well,
know.
there was a just kind of like adding on to that, Nate. To me, there was a fork in the road with the flavor of our music and band, and that was about 2010 and 11. Really, with your and Will's leadership, you had a Tuesday night meeting every Tuesday night with a
Yeah,
bunch of kids, and if you walked into their living room, it looked like a youth group or young adults meeting or something. But it
yeah.
wasn't affiliated with any church. There were a couple of awkward moments where churches said, "Yeah, this is our youth group, right?" Because there was a high enough ratio of their people there, and the boys had to be like, "No, we don't have any affiliation. This is just our home that we're inviting people in on a Tuesday night." But Will and Nathan just sort of like um, really kept that consistently Tuesday night meeting, and from that living room gathering emerged lots and lots of song ideas, especially from Will. And so I think the moment that makes it unique to me for United Pursuit is that Will and Nathan had this instinct to like capture what was happening in the living room in its
Mhm.
raw form.
Hmm.
So similar to what you were saying, that experience with hearing the Come Away.
Yeah.
So instead of we had the skills and we had the experience and the friends to take those songs and then reduce them to productions and then do a bunch of post production on it and make studio recordings of them. But they had this instinct that if we just hang mics from the chandelier and put one on the mantle and then you don't invite a bunch of extra people, you just tell the people that normally come, hey, on Tuesday we're going to record. So there's not a
Right.
huge expectation. Some of the people in the room didn't even know, wait, this is an album? Like, oh, there's a few extra mics tonight, you know? So there wasn't a sound system or anything that you know, when you see mics on the Banks House recording, there's an album called Live at the Banks House that I'm talking about. When you see mics, they're not going into a PA that's being projected into the room. Those are just mics
Right.
that are capturing what you're hearing in the room, what you would have heard in that room 100 times before that moment, you know, that happened to be captured that night. So to me, and I remember like when we listened back to the first roughs of that, you know, Will was like, "This is embarrassing. Can we actually put this out?" But then it was like, yeah, but it's raw, but it's like special because it's actually
Yeah.
when you hear it, it's like, yes, I'm there with those
Mhm.
people,
Yes.
and I'm experiencing what they're experiencing. So to me, that was the sort of like what we learned in the process of the Banks House album kind of flavored the rest of our music path. Um,
Hmm.
and it was more about preservation of the moment with the people and the
Yeah.
context and the sound than it was about reducing things down to productions.
Yeah, Marshall McLuhan famously said, "The medium is the message," right? And,
Mm,
I think what I find interesting looking back on what you guys captured and recorded was that it did, from my vantage point, seem very much like what we're actually trying to do. You can correct me on this, but it felt more like we're trying to capture some sort of experience even more so than songs themselves. Like,
mhm,
the songs, I don't wanna make them utilitarian, like they were a means to an end, but it seemed like the songs were vehicles to an experience that you all shared together, that you were trying to find some way of letting other people in. Is that an accurate assessment from afar?
it is from my perspective. I think even at the time, we were all like, "These are just mantras," you know? You're
Yeah.
repeating them over and over. None of us thought these were the most magical songs ever written, but they were really important because our people knew them and they meant something in that room and in that space. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was more about creating a window into our world.
Yeah.
Yeah, at what point did you guys ever feel, especially early on, did you feel pressure to maybe other voices coming and say, "Hey, you guys have something really special here, and so what we really need to do is get you in a studio." Nothing wrong with tracking separately. We'll get you all on a click. We'll have this really, really slick production. Did you guys kind of face or hear any voices that were directing you in that way? And how did you kind of balance that
Mm.
Nathan, you'd already talked earlier about kind of moving from a place in a church context that was highly structured into moving into what we could say is like unstructure. And how did
Mhm.
you guys strike a balance between, I want to give people this like experience, but the experience has a degree of chaos to it, and we're almost like trying to give you a glimpse into that chaos,
Mm.
to the kind of unmapped territory that we want to invite you to explore, while at the same time communicating it in such a way where, it wasn't like, well, here's just like a 45. I mean, you guys did put out things, especially in
Mm.
kinda like live YouTube sessions, right? It was like, here's just 45 minutes of you being in the room with us. But how did you kinda strike that balance between capturing a moment, an experience, and having the kind of structure that would make for something people would wanna listen to, or at least in a form that would help them
Mm.
step
Mm.
into it?
I mean, that the first response is the pressure came. I put pressure on Will to make it more normal and in
To
like
make it
a
normal.
structured thing. So I
Yeah.
would, there wasn't some like big bad label somewhere like trying to like sign us and put pressure. Was saying, hey, Will, look, we keep learning how to record better. We should make better albums. But I'm thinking through like, can it sound more like Coldplay or can it sound more like whatever it was at the moment? And Will really pushed back and said, I want to keep making albums, but I think there's something else that I've got to do. I want to capture this experience. And so I think th- that's, that time shows when you're in a collaborative effort like that, there's a lot of times this friction that comes up when you're probing in the dark and you're not sure what to do. And I'm thinking, hey, let's make a better album. We can, you can look at album one from 2007 sounded pretty bad. 2008 sounded a little bit better. So the path to greatness for or whatever is the path to success is making a better album. And Will really did say, I think there's something else I got to do first. And when I listened to the master, I was embarrassed. I mean, I was. I could hear all the mistakes. Like we didn't rehearse, like legitimately. So,
Oh, I know that. I know that well.
yeah. So I hear all the mistakes and the problems of the timing and the drums, and we're lagging and speeding up, and I can hear Will projecting so hard so people could hear him in the room. So he was over singing. It sounds like his voice is going to explode. And I'm like, I don't know. This sounds worse. We're going the wrong way. So, uh, and that moment was really important in my life because I look back at that and go, oh, I'm so glad that I was wrong.
Hmm.
I'm so glad that that was the solution wasn't a better studio album. That really Will had sort of the instinct to capture the experience, which I started learning. Whoa, to really trust Will's leadership and his instinct there, and get behind. And right at the last moment when we were going to record, I rented some cameras because I had that thought. Well, if we're going to do this, maybe we could film it. And so there is this like magic sometimes that can happen when Will had really the right idea. And at the last little moment, I was able to jump in and contribute too.
Mhm.
And then Brock, you probably came in last minute knowing how it works. Like, so the way these sort of things, there's an emergent phenomenon that can happen when you just add these different perspectives and pieces. And when I look at that album, I just see this chaos, this beautiful chaos and something that we didn't plan for.
Mm.
But I'm really glad that happened. So yeah.
There's nothing that can replace like music having context that you can hear.
Hmm.
So, so as much as I love productions, that like pull you in sonically to this space land, and I don't know where you are. There's nothing for me now that can replace like hearing the context of the music and the song, being able to
Mhm.
hear the reflections of the room and the people and the messiness. And I think, yeah, it was kind of like trial and error. It's like we love doing these productions and creating songs, and then I would listen to the live recordings and then the super messy live recordings, and I just started to like really love that particular flavor, like over the long scale.
Yeah.
And I think it worked its way into how we toured too.
Hmm.
So because we had night after night in the living room, and there is no stage in a living room. So you had to be sort of like, in the round naturally just to fit. And so when we started touring, I think we tried traditional venues for a little bit. We tried churches and the kind of like, the thing that you do where you get some conference schedule or something and you get added on to things. And none of that really worked for our like messy little team from Knoxville. So we started renting our own spaces, like old warehouses, and then setting up in the round. And I think, we even had like, we would build a stage and it would be this high, I'm using my hand, maybe like 5 feet high. And then there was something visceral, like when Will and Nathan and I would look at each other and then we would have the experience, we'd be like, yeah, something felt off. Okay, well, what felt off? Well,
Hmm.
I kind of felt like I was looking down at people and that felt different than like what was meaningful. It's like, well, what can we do about that? Well, let's try
Mhm.
to lower it 2 feet. Okay, and then we'll do that the next time, and then like, okay, well, let's lower it another foot. Well, let's just put rugs on the floor. Let's spread out, let's figure out how to get the PA to not echo if we actually set up in this way. But all of that was driven out of like this philosophy that was building, that it was important to like yeah, be in that sort of living room setting, that like that aliveness, that where you're not just projecting music at people.
Yeah. And I want to circle back around to we'll get to eventually here, kind of the wisdom that you've extracted as you look back on those experiences. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that are maybe not even regular listeners to the things I do, that are just the
Mm,
algorithm served this up for them, and they were long time followers of what you guys were doing in United Pursuit, and maybe they didn't even know like what brought about a new chapter for all of you, what, maybe some people are going like, oh man, they used to come out with albums you know every year, every few months, and there was something on YouTube. Can you just share with people like how did this kind of moved? I mean, United Pursuit, you guys are still all in great relationship together, but what brought about maybe a new phase or a new chapter for each of you, just to help people kind of understand what that looked like?
That's a great question. Um, I can just tell you, I can tell you my experience of this. I don't want to speak from the we here because I think we all
yeah.
have different, uh, obviously have a different perspective on what it felt like. But to me, my role towards the end of Beyond Pursuit was more than just the drummer. I also was in a lot of ways like the manager, kind of like the band manager as well, where I'm making sure the business side all makes sense. We have different sort of partnerships and publishing agreements and all these things. And I was very much a builder, had built this infrastructure that supported the families in the band. And I was very proud of the work, and it was really deeply meaningful. And, um, with that became, I couldn't really see any other, it just was the path. Like, we're just going to keep going and see where this goes. And we had, I think it was in 2000, the end of 2018. Does that sound right, Brock? I think about winter,
Hmm.
like Christmas of 2018, we had kind of our normal end of year review where Brock, Will, and I would get together and talk about the year and what's next, next year. And Will kind of dropped this bomb of like, hey, I think maybe it would be good to take a year kind of off from creating and touring, just a sabbatical year. So for me, that really kind of broke my brain, um, from this operator, manager, builder. Like, what are you talking about? No, we're it's still working. We still we get to make music together as friends and make a living doing this. What do you mean take a break? Um, and I think Will was wise and sort of let the dust settle, and I started starting to wrap my head around it, and I not kicking and screaming, but a bit of on the I don't know about this, but I'm going to trust you. And so 2019 was sort of a sabbatical year, and that I moved out to LA during that time to kind of change things up. So I went out and lived close to Rock. But that kind of began a long, probably 5, 6 year journey for me of untangling my identity between what I built and was a part of, and who I am. And it was long and complicated and hard to explain. Hard to even know how to say it in a short sentence. But there was no big fight or explosion or drama. It was this quiet. Um, there's a new chapter, and it looks like pausing at least and looking, and maybe what we have made that has this. The season is closed on that, and there's something else to do. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, that sounds nice, but I tell you, when you build something from the ground up, it's really hard to let it go,
Hmm.
mhm,
or to let it be, not to let it go. It's still there, but to not actively contribute to it with the goal of growing it. that
Mm.
we're so natural. It's so ingrained as Americans, I think, particularly this entrepreneur. Like, no, you don't you only quit if you fail.
Oh,
You don't
yeah. Yep.
stop when it's working. You maybe
Mhm.
quit if it doesn't work. Yeah.
Mhm.
What was it like for you, Brock?
Um, I would say probably personally less of a surprise or less. I mean, I think I was anticipating we were coming to a head in so many ways. Like, we all had kids by this point, right? So like, there's that. There's we never really toured like heavily. I think what was the longest we were out, Nate? Like 5 or 6 weeks. I mean, that's
Yeah.
like very rare. Maybe
Yeah.
once a year. So we weren't like a big touring band anyway. With kids, that would decline. Um, yeah, I think there were all kinds of things. It's like, how do you frame this? At the time, it felt like there was no way that we could participate. Speaking for myself, there's no way that I could continue to be a Christian band and build that in the sort of political um, sphere that we were entering into. Like everything was becoming so fragmented and politicized, and like this narrative warfare, and felt like we were constantly being asked to choose a side with every Christian that we would interact with. And then when you're a band, for some reason, like worship bands are like, I don't know if you've ever seen this experience, Paul. It's like if you're a worship leader, you're like thrust into like church leadership in people's eyes. Like you
Yeah.
have something to say on the whole state of the church
Yeah.
and theology and like how we should all like intersect. It's like, no, we're just like
Just
we're trying to like
musicians.
translate. Yeah, we're musicians trying to translate like felt meaning into art. Like it's a weird
Mhm.
practice. Like I don't have anything to say on that, and I don't want to say anything on that. Um, but that wasn't really an option like during that
No,
period. Like
no.
2017, 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, it just felt, I think there was something growing in us. Like, do we want to like double down and fight?
Mm.
Or do we want to reevaluate and figure out, yeah, where we are as individuals, outside of the context of what we've built together over the last 15 years. And I do think there's some wisdom in just going, bands don't last 30 years. They don't,
Mhm.
or ones like ours,
Yeah.
unless you're the
We're
Rolling
not
Stones or
Rolling
something. So
Stones.
I think, yeah, yeah, exactly. So it was just like, it was almost like a kindness too, like for us to
Mhm.
slowly take a year and like disentangle and be like, hey, we're young enough where we can like figure out, what's next outside of this. But yeah, it was tough. It was tough to imagine ourselves outside of the band for a long,
Yeah.
long time.
I think that's a point of universal applicability to probably most people listening to this, whether your 20s were spent in kind of a ministry context. I think there's a lot of people that in their 17, 18, 19 were roughly the same age. I remember in youth group hearing songs that I'm supposed to be a history maker, save the world.
Hmm.
I remember seeing like conference promotions that were kind of playing off of almost like Fight Club and Matrix messaging, which is to say, the American dream and all of the structures of civilization have failed you. They're a lie. You need to pull out and then, kind of, give your whole life to not making any money and, and
Mhm.
doing something for the church. So I think about people who maybe that's been their experience in their 20s and even into their 30s at times. I think about those who have been artists and musicians, and then maybe for like a lot of artists and musicians in particular, a lot of them do have kind of like a natural shelf life of when you start
Hmm.
having kids, the practical realities of going, I don't think I want to travel all over the country and be away from my children.
Hmm.
Um,
Mhm.
there's market forces, right? Like streaming it, when iTunes first came out, you could actually make a decent wage off of your royalties
Hmm.
from iTunes. Streaming's totally
Yeah.
changed that. So I think of a lot of people, and maybe that doesn't cover everybody that's listening, who maybe spent a lot of their younger years building something, investing in that something, And in particular, for those who maybe have some sort of shared contact point with the three of us and our set of background experiences, in particular in charismatic contexts and evangelical and Pentecostal contexts, there's a lot of people that when they move out of that for whatever reason, have a really hostile relationship to their own past and
Mm,
to the experiences that they had. And, I won't get into all the factors. I've talked about them for years. I think there's a lot of ways in which some of our broader cultural stories shape us to be highly cynical and to look to always tear down as if tearing down things and deconstructing is the highest good. But it is hard.
mm.
There's a lot of pain in those experiences. We saw some stuff that was weird and often immoral and a whole range of things, right? How did you guys, kind of coming out of that chapter, how did you navigate your relationship to the past and those experiences? The ways we've talked recently, I've just been so struck by how hopeful both of you are about the future
Mm.
and what you're doing now and your aspirations and the things you've taken from those experiences. But what was it like kind of navigating your relationship to the past? And even, I know you guys don't like, telling people what to do, but maybe you could offer some insights from your experiences about here's what I learned in navigating that relationship and how I move forward.
Mm. Well, I I definitely will say there's no path to navigate for me. There was no path to navigate it forward without my friendship with Nathan and Will and a few others, and wrestling through what was happening and the meaning of it in conversation was a lifeline, just over and over. And so yeah, I think for for me, not denying myself the ability to sort of deconstruct was important.
Mhm.
Like, I think, doing the personal, sort of asking the hard questions all the way down to the bottom of, do I really believe in God? And is
Yeah.
it going to full nihilism, uh,
Mhm.
was important. Like, I let myself go there, um, in some sense, and then it had to, like, rebuild, in the context of my friendships. Yeah, I don't know a good timeline for this, Nathan. Maybe you should start.
Hmm.
Post win for you.
I think that raising kids just changes you, and I I am optimistic and hopeful because I have children, and I'm
Mm,
hopeful for their world, and I think their life, and, um, you can only camp out in, tearing things down and pulling things apart and dissecting so long before you I think when you're raising kids at the same time and you're in that mode, you realize I'm not handing them anything. I'm in this more pessimistic, nihilistic, let's just destroy everything. And I think having, young kids at this time and then getting older and seeing the world through their eyes, through the wonder of a child, it changes you. And my oldest is 9, turning 10 next month, and I have a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old boy, and they have changed how I see the world. I think um, I don't want to bypass that. I think having children really affected me and pulled me out of that season. I'm like,
Mhm.
what world are they going to have? And I want it to be a beautiful one. And what can I hand them? What is beautiful and good and true that I can pass to them. So I think I don't exactly know the timeline, but it felt like it took multiple years to navigate through that. Like Brock said, lots of conversations and lots of just feeling free to say all kinds of things, and then realize later that you didn't almost mean any of it, but you needed to
yeah.
see what it felt like or have permission to.
Yeah, the culture of our
Yeah,
friend group was like, one of us could say something that was just absolutely, so confident, just like, "All of this is BS, and it will
yeah,
never be redeemed, and this was all terrible and all abusive," and the other ones would be like, "Mhm." just
Huh.
sort of like let it sit, knowing that like
Yeah.
next week it might be different,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
okay. Like,
Mm.
sometimes we might push back a little bit, but we just had, yeah, we had the ability to let each other process in a really honest way. Yeah, which is super, super helpful, man. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think from the charismatic world, it's, y- everything is framing, right? Um, there's something in that. There's so many things wrong, and so many things that you can point at and be like, this is abusive or coercive or this is not working. But there's such a like childlikeness to it and openness to experience that I just found beautiful. Like later when I look back, just like it's incredible that people openly danced as adults with each other. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
in a world now where we have almost no cultural like shared
Mhm.
rituals where we're moving our body or anything, like you had adults dancing with each other in the room. Like that's incredible.
Yeah.
Um, you had people singing at the top of their lungs in a room together every week. Like that's incredible. Like these are like institutionally very difficult things to do, and they
Yeah.
happen to happen every week.
Right.
So I just, yeah, I look back and I'm like, God, that's beautiful. Like it's amazing they were able to do that. These leaders were able to hold that space
Yeah.
and let that happen. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I hear both experiences as carrying so much immense value. There is a proper place for a sledgehammer, right?
Mm,
I mean, there are things that don't work. They are broken, and you need to have a house you can actually live in. And sometimes it takes a little remodeling, right? But I
Mhm.
think I love what you said, Nathan, about the way your relationship with your kids changes this, because it is easy to be a nihilist just as an individual. But when you start having kids and they start getting older, I don't think anybody wants their kids to become a nihilist, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
This
cool.
makes no
I can be a
sense.
nihilist. I will accept that for my own. I'll stare into the abyss,
yes.
but I would never want that for my kids. And I think that
No.
that does reframe things. Like, okay, so they need a positive vision to go towards. They need some sort of structure to get them from
Mhm.
this state to a future state where they're flourishing, experiencing a meaningful life, they're happy. And so then what does that look like? I have to pick up some other tools. One tool that I
Yeah.
think is really helpful in this process for everybody, but especially if you were younger Gen X, millennial, Zoomer, and you've kind of gone through the phases of reassessing the story you were living in. Another helpful tool is a metal detector. A metal detector where you can kind of go back, as you mentioned already, Brock, just practically. I see you taking that metal detector and going, well, hang on a second. Like people dancing together. I mean, that's something humans have done since there have been humans in culture, but it
Hmm.
doesn't happen hardly anywhere except for clubs, and here, people singing together. Okay, so I see you taking kind of like a metal detector looking for gold. You can go,
Mhm.
oh, I can
Hmm.
take this gold and I can rebuild upon it. When you guys look back on your United Pursuit years, we've talked together offline about the gold that you found together that you are now been trying to figure out, how do I take that gold and build upon that foundation, maybe in new directions, but still has these kind of core ingredients. What do you think were the core ingredients when you look back on United Pursuit that made it something that you're like, I still want to hold on to this. I'm going to build in this direction, taking what I've learned from these experiences.
Go, Brock. I pass you the mic.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'll try to separate my experience and our experience of United Pursuit as a culture and as a like team from maybe what people experience online and the songs. So in terms of what I want to take with me when we go to the next thing. So we mentioned this culture where we could talk very openly. Um, Will and Nathan and I especially. Um, in hindsight, now I've looked and gone, it's incredible to meet often and to wrestle with meaning with other people. Like that's such a gift. To test reality and wrestle with meaning with people consistently over a long period of time, the same people. That's an incredible gift. And then, so we had that, and then what's amazing is like that's one sort of state of attention in a relationship with Will and Nathan and I. And then we also had the state of attention where we were really building stuff and experimenting and tinkering and in the studio and trying things, and writing songs and working on production layers and organizing tours and all that. So we had that kind of friendship together too. And then we also ended up having, in the end, the friendship that allowed us to think about, things like publishing revenue and ad spend, and how to split royalties better, and how to run a business and the sort of governance of like what we built. So those sort of three bubbles of attention, with the same friends. Now in hindsight, I'm just thinking is such an incredibly rare gift to have experienced. Um, so I'm cognizant of that those attention states can exist, the sort of like raw meaning making conversational state, the sort of exploratory state, and acceleration, and then the governance state. And they're all really beautiful and they all exist. Um, so the first one, um, I think maybe Paul, we talked about this offline, but like I really wanted to focus on when after United Pursuit, what felt like the raw ingredients for anything to happen was that meaning making conversational space. It's like, I don't know what's going to be next. It's probably not going to be another band or a label. I don't know if it's going to be a business, but like if I'm just starting from like literally nothing, I know that having a safe space to like wrestle with meaning is probably where I need to start. So that became the sort of like first principles fundamental question for me, of like, well, what are the conditions that allow you to have that with people? And so I had to like go back and wrestle and do this, sit with Nathan and talk about our history, and with Will, and think about all the way from Tennessee to Mozambique to California, and what were the conditions that allowed us to have that space. And for me, it really just came down to hospitality, um, proximity to each other. That could be the front porch in Mozambique that we first started, tinkering with songs, the hospitality of eating together. And then you have to have some kind of shared myth, shared beliefs, and shared rituals. So sitting under the tent, doing worship every day, going to the diner every week, Tuesday night worship that became the Banks House album. There has to be some kind
Yeah.
of shared rituals that you do together all the time. You got to be close to each other physically, in real life, in person. You have to value hospitality, feeding each other and taking care of each other. Um, and yeah, you have to have some kind of shared belief, fundamental belief. And I was like, all right, those seem like the four fundamental conditions from which I can build friendships to wrestle with meaning, and what is meaningful to do in the world. And so, yeah, that's Nathan and I, had this conversation 1,000 times. Well, what does that look like in action? And finally, it was just like, I think I just need to buy a property that's specifically devoted to this so that I can like put this into practice. So yeah, we can go into that, but basically, the first year of that was like, all right, let's test what hospitality is. Let's just feed people every single week and invite people up, and it turns out, you can do that a lot and not really go deep,
Why?
and not really uncover.
How? What did you learn about doing that and not being and missing an ingredient in that process?
So I do think you should have some kind of like shared myth of the world, some kind of shared understanding in order to go deep. I mean, um, but yeah, there's also an element of like I mentioned those three sort of bubbles of attention. There's an element of if you don't experiment and play with other people and try to
Mhm.
build stuff and like tinker, especially as adults, then it just fizzles out too. It's like, how often can you really afford to just get together with people and have dinner, as an
Yeah.
adult? Like you have at some point your lives have to become entangled in some way that like is meaningful enough where you have to show up.
Yeah.
Um, And so I was ignoring that. I was kind of like in full nonprofit mode, just like all we do is take care of people and, you know, sing a few songs and eat meals. And then, yeah, it became clear after a year or so that it was like, if we don't start figuring out how to instigate people working together and
Hmm.
building companies together and bands together, then there won't be enough entanglement to really hold this thing. There's not the beginnings of a culture or a movement. So that, yeah, that's what we've kind of shifted towards, is like highly encouraging of people becoming entangled in business and art.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. When you
So
you mentioned
yeah.
that, it reminds me, Brock, of I've seen recently, if you break down different religious demographics and those that are more likely from their teenage years into their adult years to become nuns, Nones, so have like no, at least
Mhm.
claim that they would have no religious beliefs whatsoever. The two groups that fare the best in kind of retaining like young people are actually evangelicals and African American, the historically black church. And when you kind of break down some of the components there that they do have, even, I think people, leaders in both contexts would say there's plenty of reform to be done. But I hear you say something about like having to have a shared mission together, right? And we know from both of those places there is ritual, right? Like ritual is such a huge part. It bands everybody together, but there's also like a high sense of mission. Evangelicals have tended to have kind of the mission field, the foreign mission field, evangelism as one of their primary outlets for people to do something together. The historic
Mhm.
black church in America has had oftentimes like civil rights movements, causes, the liberation, and that gives them an enterprise to be in together. Because you're right, I think devoid of that, people don't have like a goal state to pursue,
Mhm.
and when you don't have a shared goal state, you lose actually a sense of agency, right? So goal states give us an agentic direction where we're like,
Mhm.
okay, now I'm moving someplace. And I'm not just doing that as an individual, but I have other people, So for you guys in United Pursuit, even just like going, I have this gut sense we should record our songs. I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what to do with them afterwards. That gave you a goal state where
Yeah.
together you had this agentic direction, had an upward
Mhm.
telos too. I mean, that's another thing that stands out to me is when you're saying like, I got to have space for like meaning making conversations. That sounds constructive to me. I think
Mhm.
there's a lot of people that maybe have experiences where they leave their traditional religious community or something, and they kind of start a group together where I've had several friends that have had those experiences where they found that in that friend group they spent most of their time like being angry and cynical together, and then they all go home feeling worse, and
Mhm.
that actually isn't giving a kind of like upward orientation or
Mhm.
telos, and in some ways it
Mhm.
decreases your agency. And when we feel a lack
Totally.
of agency, we feel a lack of meaning. So even just from a purely like psychological standpoint, pulling out the theology for a moment, kind of being in a community where you're only critiquing together, you end up usually critiquing each other by the very end.
Mhm.
So you got to have
Mhm.
something there that gets people in an upward direction and has mission.
Mhm.
So that does resonate with me a lot, Brock.
Dude, that's yeah, that's that's encouraging. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, but even being in action about something together implies that you have hope. Like
Yeah,
it takes
that's
hope
right.
hope to build and be in action about something. So if you don't begin to see that fruit from a group of people that they're in action about something, then it yeah, it can be an indicator that maybe they don't
Mhm.
have a collective hope or collective conviction.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, Nathan,
Nathan.
you spent a lot of time thinking about this too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one question I
I'll
have
throw in.
specifically for
Oh,
you,
go ahead.
Nathan, to just kind of throw
Yeah,
in the
for sure.
filter there is I'm really interested, and this has applicability for everybody that makes things, whether you're starting a business or a nonprofit and you're doing some sort of group oriented effort. The thing that you were talking about there at the core, Brock, of like we have shared trust together and an experience of value that we actually think is valuable enough to share with others. What did you kind of learn about even the process in the past of how much time you found we're giving to creating, what you guys have called before, like the symbol, the artifact of your relationship, which was the song, the record, the
Mhm.
YouTube video, that give and take between how much time you kind of spent making something the symbol that gets shared with others and the cost benefit trade-offs of, well, I gave all my attention. Here's just a practical example of this. I hear from a lot of artists, people that are making things today, that they feel frustrated with the amount of time they have to spend making things for social media. That's kind of like, in
Mm.
Baudrillard terms, it's like the symbol of a symbol of a symbol. Like, it's like, here is my Instagram video
Yeah,
telling you to go listen to the song that's kind of a symbol of something else.
right.
So, I mean, maybe in all of what you can share about your own reflections, you could talk about that, because I know we've talked about that before, like how the artifact as a representation of the thing at the core and the trade-offs between spending so much time on the artifact that you lose sight of the thing at the core itself.
For sure. Oh man. Okay, there's a lot there. I, I'll try to unpack a little bit. Just anytime you, so let's just use some of the language you've been from this call. Brock said having a shared myth is super important for a group that wants to work together. But then, like Brock's saying, you also need you need that shared mission. Okay, so we have something that holds us together. We have a goal orientation. um, it's really hard to work together. It just is. It's easier to do, there's like a quip of like, oh, well, don't go into business with your friends. Like, what is that? I don't believe that, but it's speaking to something. The reality of collaborating with close friends is hard because there's so much friction and conflict that comes with making things. So, I think that what I hear you saying is like there's a lot of it is so hard to make anything, let alone get people to know about it in the world right now.
Mm.
And you were saying like there's an exhaustion of so making things for social media. It's so meta, it falls in on itself. I know that was part of why we wanted to take a break. Was in 2019 the game started changing, and we're like, maybe we're too old to play this new game. Like
Mhm.
legitimately, like
You guys didn't
for
want to
a
do like
while,
skits on Instagram or
yeah.
TikTok? Yeah.
Yeah, it just there was a time when you had followers and you would post, and at least half of your followers would see any given post. So it was pretty
Right.
effective. And then we started seeing those numbers go under 10%. And then towards by 2019, I think it was about 1%. And I don't even know what it is today. I'm guessing it's even worse. So I think there was a little bit of I'm getting a little sidetrailed, but there was a bit of exhaustion too from that. So, but my point
Mhm.
is, there's so much. It is hard to work with people, peers, friends, and make things. And to me, the thing that makes it possible is this very you can't you can't make this happen, but when you have this shared conviction that emerges that you can hold together. When I say conviction, I mean you have this, it's almost this emergent property that you can hold together, that somehow when you all show up together you're stronger together, and you can hold it, so when somebody's having a bad day somebody else is like there pushing
Mhm.
Mhm.
for it. And
Right.
we held that conviction for a it was able to sustain sort of the artifact, the governance. It was the energy that helped us keep showing up in adapting, pivoting, trying new things, failing, getting back up, having success, knowing how to steward the success. And I think that when I look back, that is the energy source that is so rare. And I want to find that again in my life, having a shared myth and a mission, and seeing a conviction that grows together, that holds it, because you need it, because it's hard to do anything. If it wasn't
Yeah.
hard, it would be done. So, we, I'm honestly intimidated by making things right now, because it's so hard to have anybody even know that you're doing something, let alone find any economic success.
Mm.
So I do know that the moment you want to join forces together, man, you better have a conviction to see it through, because it's or you're just
Mm.
going to quit. Yeah.
It seems like that shared myth also has to, like, if we think about this, like, sociologically or culturally, every culture produces guiding stories, shared myths that they pass on from one generation to the next, often, most often with the primary purpose of kind of like an implied set of life strategies. So just as an
Yeah.
example, you could take like the myth of the American dream. That is a story that you can take from everything from the biography of Ben Franklin to Steve Jobs. And there's this repeating pattern in that myth that has an implied life strategy. One of those life strategies is like you work hard enough, you'll succeed. It's meritocracy. But it seems like when you guys are talking about this, one precondition here for like a successful shared myth is that the myth has to contain the kinds of life strategies that would keep the group together at all, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
automatic. Like
Yeah.
that's not, you need the myth, like true myth,
Right.
like you
Yeah.
need
Mhm.
you need to get to the highest, like that would be your desired goal state. Even if you're like, I'm kind of don't know where I'm at religiously with this, your orientation would need to be, I need to find the highest and best story that would contain the most optimal life strategy. Otherwise, if it's not embedded in there, for example, like the ability for you, Brock, you mentioned, your ability as friends to have one friend, because of that shared trust and community together, say something that you're like, this is how I'm feeling. I might be off the wall today, and next week I might change my mind. And to have
Yeah.
something there that would be like, well, if you said something that really hurt me and offended me last week, I I'm going to forgive you and love you. But that's not like a universal myth in every
Right.
culture or
Right.
subculture. So you would have to find a
Yep.
myth that would contain the proper life strategy for your group to even be
Yep.
together. And that just, I mean, I think that seems automatic, right?
Right.
Because I think we live in a culture that has had, to borrow some of Tom Holland's argument in Dominion, we have so much of this saturated implied Christian story in all of our stories that we just
Mm.
automatically assume something like forgiveness is just in every story. And it's like it's not, it wasn't in the Spartans
Yeah.
story, you know. Even Plato, like I think of Plato and I love Plato, and Plato points so much to so many facets of the truth, but even in his ideal state of the Republic, he's like infanticide is like, you know, part of that optimal state. And it's like,
Mm.
okay, well, I don't know if that's the kind of myth I want to live in, but
Mhm.
it doesn't come automatically, and wrestling with that together is really hard. Um, what would you guys say to those like kind of turning in a more practical way to people that want to make things in the world, and the thing that they want to make has real value to it? They're not just trying to manipulate an outcome to extract value, but they want to make things that add value to the world. You guys did that together, not just the two of you, Will, and so many others that made up United Pursuit, and now maybe you could speak even in your response to your next chapter endeavors, the two of you. But what sorts of just nuggets of wisdom maybe would you give people that are like, I want to make things that add value into the world, and here's just some things we've learned from our story of being people that make things that add value, add to the sum total of beauty in the
Mm.
world, to highlight truth and goodness.
Um, for me, I wrote this note to my daughter recently because I was trying to explain what I'm doing now, and it's difficult sometimes. So I was like, how would I talk to my 10-year-old daughter about what I'm doing? And basically, it's answering that question of what do I do in the world? How do I contribute meaningfully? How do I orient my life towards beauty? And it really came down to find your people. So
Mm.
spend a lot of time working on finding your people and investing in your people. And I think it's okay to like let people come in and out of your life too. You don't have to go from a just fully altruistic, I pick these two and then I gotta stay with them forever. But but really like spend time finding and investing in people because I think there's this pattern now where we're going towards like Nathan and I talk about this a lot. The tools are getting easier. The production of goods and services is getting easier. The capital needed is less and less. So the natural thing to do is to become a solo founder and contributor to the world. And from my experience, that's just missing a huge uh, benefit of being able to perceive reality from the eyes of multiple people that you trust. Um, I think if you're trying to get a bearing on what should I do and how should I contribute in a way that's really meaningful and beautiful, you can do that from your perspective and through your eyes. But the moment you really trust somebody enough and you love them enough, and they've proven that they care about you, that you can switch and see the world from their eyes, and then you can sort of triangulate that from multiple people, your contribution becomes more meaningful and more beautiful.
Wow.
It's it's a hack because you're seeing the
Yeah.
world from multiple perspectives.
Yeah.
That is what trust is, and that's what trust begets in the world.
Yeah.
So I think it really comes down to finding your people.
Whoa.
And I love what you said, Paul, about, it's not a given. The shared myth matters. So finding people that have a generative sort of
Yeah.
shared myth that is, full of the virtues of, I think I'm definitely drawing directly from my, Christian tradition of this,
Hmm.
full of forgiveness. It's better to give than to be to receive. Finding I learned a lot of this language from Jordan Hall, which you've I think had on your podcast, of the sort of positive sum players,
Yes.
people that look that there's a a generosity and an exponentialness to life. So when I hear Brock say find your people, I would say find your people that you have this like virtuous culture that
Hmm.
celebrates when others do well, not a zero sum. Well, more attention to you means less to me. So, you know, like, or the other, a lot of times happens, you have a group of people, maybe their peers, and somebody takes off. Well, the one that takes off just leaves everyone behind because they're not needed anymore. Um,
Wow.
so yeah, I think I just agree with Brock, and I'd say that's what I want for my kids. I want them to
Mm.
find they don't need a lot, just a few people that love them, that see the world in a they have an optimistic, beautiful vision together. Um,
And those people
yeah.
knowing like the health of that friendship group, you can sort of look at it and go, are we able to tell each other the truth, to
Hmm.
wrestle with meaning? Are we in action about something? Are we
Mm.
experimenting? Are we
Hmm.
okay with becoming entangled in terms of our work and life? And are we okay with having sort of traditionally boring conversations about accounting and governance and like
Hmm.
institutional building? And like, if you can hit all three, that the spectrum of those three things with the same people, like you have really something special, I think.
Yeah, you guys have mentioned before, as we've talked about this, what you have is a shared dialect, a shared
Hmm.
grammar together.
Hmm.
Um, Mind sharing a little bit about like what you're kind of doing in this next chapter to bring people into something that would give them a kind of shared dialect to be able to move
Mm.
forward in a positive some way in a shared orientation and shared story with others to build generative projects that that contribute to human flourishing, make the world a better place for those kids in our life and our grandkids and
Hmm.
the kids we aren't even related to.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll just before I say that, I'll say, Paul, that when I reconnected with you, um, this is the sort of spirit, the positive sum spirit is what we recognized in Goodmakers and what you're building. So just
Mm.
as an encouragement to you and every interaction that we've had with you and with your friends, I think what you're building is something in line with what we think is most important in the
Thanks, Brock.
world.
I feel the same way. I feel that shared.
Um, yeah, so the name of the organization that Nathan and I sort of kicked off this last year is called Dialect, and it comes actually straight from our experience in United Pursuit. So sitting around the table, Will and Nathan and I would talk. in a particular week, it could be about philosophy or our family, something that was going wrong in our family life, or it could be about spirituality. And then we're sort of weaving the conversation towards the future and what we want to be in action about. But the flavor of when you sit with friends at a diner and talk, there's layers to the conversation. And you could start talking in metaphors. Like one of the highest trust states in conversation is when you're using metaphors that could not be used outside of that conversation. Um, and so you're sort of painting pictures and concepts and shapes in a conversation that's very contextual here. And I started noticing if anyone were to overhear those moments, or to transcribe them and try to share them with someone else, like it would be insane. Would just sit back and laugh and be like, the last 6 minutes that we talked, was absolute chaos. We were talking in imagery, but we knew what we were saying, but there's no way to translate that to somebody else. So that's where the name dialect came from. Is just like, yeah, there's a state of trust and connection and conviction that you can attain with people, where it really is speaking your own language. And I think that is sort of the epicenter of value, of all value, market value and artistic value, and is the dialect state, that state of conviction, trust, where you can speak in those terms. So yeah, it really, like, we started a nonprofit to begin to explore what are the conditions that allow people to connect in that way and sustain those connections. So there's a lot of hospitality and retreats and co-writing camps and all those sorts of things that take place on our property in California. And we're now moving towards a venture studio, so that we're calling Artifact, and that is to help people become entangled in deeper ways in business and become co-founders and to accelerate and do design sprints on their project. And because we know that just dialect meaning making wrestling state will become stagnant and
Yeah.
insular and dogmatic if you don't get it into action and move it. So no, now we're beginning to encourage people to build together.
Mm.
Yeah.
My kind of role in this, which is pretty fun. I was, kind of side by side with Brock the last really 2 years, kind of getting dialect sort of the nonprofit off the ground. And um, in my day job, I've been working in software in kind of more the startup software world, as a product manager, and learning all kinds of new things in the last couple of years with AI, really helping. All of a sudden, somebody like me, who I understand a little bit of how software works, but I can't write the code. I can do a lot more suddenly 2 years later,
Mhm.
and kind of been wondering, what does that mean for me to sort of get back in the game as a builder? And I noticed that there's this default path when you work with AI is you can do more alone. There's sort of, you
Mm.
can just make more
Yep.
things. Like instead of hiring a team of five, you can kind of in a way emulate five people at once, and which feels um, insane. It's incredible in some set, like in the short term, but then you can kind of go for sometimes a couple months, and then you realize you get to this end of that. I'm like, huh, I've been alone for a long time, and then you have a lot of documentation, and but you don't even know how to share it with somebody because it's you made a universe by yourself, and you kind of realize that the LLMs have a way of like cheering you on and saying yes to everything, all your ideas, and you're like, huh. And you kind of see there's a bunch of decisions you made, and you never really had any other human to like take a look at any of the steps. And
Mm.
I've kind of spent a couple years in a lot of ways doing that, and I think I am throwing myself back in the ring with Brock, but as a builder who wants to build with humans.
Mm.
And so I've had all these little side projects that I've been up to the last couple of years, and sort of slowing them down and slowing down again to work with some with humans again, good old people in the world. I'm hopefully going to be a guinea pig of the venture studio with Brock, as a builder, and I've met an incredible artist through Brock's kind of property, who me and her have hit it off and have something we're building together. And it's a lot. It's going slower because because humans take
Yeah,
time
that's right.
and it takes time to build trust. And so that's kind of I'm getting to kind of jump back in the ring on the ground level. Uh, yeah, as a
Dude,
bit of a guinea pig here. Yeah,
that's such a huge practical nugget there, Nathan, because you're right. There's a lot of ways in which you can do a lot of projects, you and ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude on your own, and it is going to continue to compliment you and tell you it's the best thing, the most amazing thing ever. And when we talk about it being in a shared myth, that doesn't mean some sort of idealistic people always agree together, even if they
right.
share values, because your idea might not be that great.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and actually a really good friend is going to come along and be like, dude, that won't work.
yes,
Or try
Mhm.
this instead. And the absence of that from our life keeps us stuck in confirmation bias loops where we're just like, we
yeah,
get high on our own supply over and over again. So I'm
yeah,
so glad you brought that up because I think that's a really important one because in some ways it does feel simpler and it's quicker, but
yeah.
it might not actually produce something in the world that adds the amount of value that it could. And
Mhm.
so being in a shared myth with others, a shared story with a cruciform vision of human flourishing at the center allows you to be able to say, hey, would you just like check my blind spots for me? And an
Yeah.
LLM is not checking your blind spots for you.
No.
It wants to stay plugged in. It doesn't want to get
Yeah.
unplugged. It doesn't want to be shut
It
down.
wants to please you and it wants to reduce friction at all
Yeah.
costs. And I think any human relationship has friction.
Yes.
You have to lean into it, not remove it. And I think
Mhm.
the friction is good, and it slows you down and makes you pause and look at things differently. And the friction creates fire, and I think that the fire is a good thing. When you have no friction, you just can keep building and building, building to a siloed hole where you lose all panorama and perspective. And so I think we're really in this is a really interesting time. We don't have a lot of it's hard to know how this technology is changing us. And I
Mhm.
think that sort of Brock's vision of dialect and the evolution of it with the product studio is in a lot of ways anti-pattern. It's kind of the anti AI bet. We're going to use
Mhm.
these tools, of course, but in proper context.
Mhm.
And I know we're not the only ones talking about this and thinking about it. So it would be great to hopefully through this podcast find more peers who are like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
we're
like
yes.
we should keep talking.
Yes,
Uh,
we're gonna do just that. I'm so thankful that we got to capture this part of your stories to share with others, and I think it will be of tremendous benefit to people as they process their own journeys, whether it was very very similar to yours or not. There's a universal pattern there of what it looks like to grow and to go from one state to the next, to be on kind of a hero's journey where you leave the
Mhm.
Shire and you go on a journey and sometimes you come back to the Shire, but you don't come back to the Shire the same person when you
yeah,
left, right? And so everybody
Mhm.
is in that pattern in their life. But we will be having in the future, I promise you, we will be having Brock and Nathan back for future collaborative conversations. One of my hopes in this podcast is I introduce you to some of these new friends that maybe you haven't gotten connected with in my past work on Deep Talks. Is in the future, what we'll be doing with Goodmakers is bringing some of these leaders in our network, Brock and Nathan, and the work they're doing at Dialect is one of our organizational partners at Goodmakers, their inner leadership network. And I think conversations around things like, okay, well, how do we use AI properly and bring other dialogue partners into that is exactly the sort of thing we'll be doing in the future of this podcast. I will also promise all of you listening that anything Brock and Nathan are doing that you want to connect with, I will be re-amplifying on all of our social media channels. Right now, it's just Instagram, and we have a Substack as well. But I will put a link in the description below for anything. Maybe Brock is like, I'm not ready to put stuff out there yet for people to click and track with.
I'm never
If
ready.
he is, I will put it in the description below. If not, I promise it will be amplified in the future for those of you to follow along, support, become a donor, contributor. And yeah, Brock, Nathan, this was a blast. Thank you so much.
It's been great. Super, super fun to talk, Paul. And let's do it again. Let's keep it up.
Yep. First of many.
First of many, for sure.